Trump, postal workers don't deserve a financial lifeline. Trump and leaders in Congress must immediately fill the gap in the stimulus bill with direct relief on the scale needed to save our public postal service and many businesses and families that depend on it. The financially strapped United States Postal Service wound up with crumbs in the $2.2 trillion stimulus deal, despite playing a vital role in our nation's public health and economic stability at the time of the crisis. Yeah, you know how a lot of people are getting those stimulus checks via the mail? They're getting them via the mail. They lose money. Here's what Trump says. They lose money every time they deliver a package for Amazon or these other internet companies. If they'd raise prices by actually a lot, then you'd find out that the Postal Service could make money or break even, but they don't do that. Tell your Democrat friend that he should focus on that, Trump said. Now, that's not true. What Trump just said in that quote, that's not true. So here's what the Common Dreams article points out. For years now, Trump has repeated the lie that the United States Postal Service loses money through its contracts with Amazon and other private corporations to handle the last legs of their deliveries. A task force Trump himself commissioned in 2018 contradicted that argument. In its most recent quarterly statement, the United States Postal Service reported a 2.3% increase in revenue from parcel delivery and increased revenue per package. The real cause of the Postal Service's immediate financial crisis is the coronavirus pandemic. And we got money for the banks. We got trillions for the banks. We're going to bail out the cruise industry. We're going to bail out this. We're going to bail out that. But we don't have money for the Postal Service that people are relying on. That people are relying on for checks. That people are relying on that for their Social Security in many cases. A buddy of mine, Jesse Case, very funny comedian, he tweets this out. I think it's a really good theme. So here's a headline from the Washington Post that he retweeted. The headline said, White House rejects bailout for United States Postal Service battered by coronavirus. What my buddy Jesse points out, go follow him on Twitter at Jesse Case. The word you want is funding. The White House won't provide funding because they bailed out cruise lines with our tax money because they're fucking criminals. Well put. Amen to that. They bailed out the banks because they're criminals, because them and the banks are criminals. Look at what the stimulus actually was. The stimulus was actually the United States government, our federal government, which has proven itself useless beyond comprehension, just basically said, here's a bunch of money, banks. You figure out how to distribute it. That's literally what they did through the Payment Protection Program and all these other programs where the banks get to decide whether or not you get a dime. And what's happened so far? Well, Wells Fargo just stopped taking applications randomly. They were handed all this money. Hey, distribute this amidst the people. And they said, we're not equipped for this. Screw you. And what's the recourse for that? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's almost like our federal government are just puppets and just a vague middleman between us and the banks and the ruling class and Wall Street, who really runs everything. That's why this isn't a country. This is a corporation with state lines. And the corporation will decide what crumbs you do or don't get. And they're deciding, well, we don't need the Postal Service. And of course, the politicians are going along with it. Now, here's something fun. So we can't fund the Postal Service, but here's something we can afford to do. Here's something we can afford to do. Can't help the Postal Service that people rely on, that gives people jobs, that people relying on for their Social Security checks, that people relying on for their stimulus. But here's something we can do. Check this out from ABC. The Air Force Thunderbirds honored healthcare workers and first responders on the front line of the coronavirus pandemic with a flyover above the Vegas Strip. They're the military-industrial complex still getting some money here. They had this flyover for healthcare workers and first responders. Now, I'm all about recognizing healthcare workers and first responders. I'm all about the people working in medicine right now, putting themselves on the front line, putting themselves in harm's way. But what the hell does this do to make them any safer? Does this... How many masks could have been purchased with what this flyover costs? How many, I have a lot of friends who are doctors and nurses. Well, not a lot, but I have, some friends and family who, work in the medical field. And one of my friends who's a nurse who I knew back when I lived in Nashville, and I saw on her Instagram, one of the things that they're doing to support them in their community is there's a different organization. There's a different restaurant that's bringing them food pretty much every day. A different restaurant brings them food. They bring them pizza and they bring them sandwiches, whatever it may be. How many free lunches for working doctors and nurses could, and I mean free lunch in the good way, not free lunch in like the big pharma way where they like bribe you to endorse their drugs by giving you free lunch. That's a different topic. But how many lunches could be provided for what this flyover cost? Look at this. We're honoring you with a big flyover because this pads the pockets of the MIC. What we could really be doing is something that actually helps the doctors and nurses on the front line. Why don't they have a thing where food is provided all the time to nurses and doctors and people working, where there's always food provided for them by restaurants in the area, and the government can foot the bill? Why don't they do something like that? Why don't they do something like that? You build a government for the food. That way it helps local businesses survive and it feeds the people who are on the front lines. Why don't they do something like that? They can afford this, they can afford that. I know that might be kind of crazy because it might be like, okay, so every nurse at Hospital X had 12 meals today. Because every restaurant wants to be like, all right, pay for this. We gave them 40 billion sandwiches. Pay for it. But you get the idea. I mean, obviously, I don't know how you'd institute something like that. I'm just spitballing here. But you get the idea that there's a million better ways we could help people that are on the front lines than having some symbolic flyover. But that pads the right pockets. That's the issue. That's the issue. And of course, we can't help the Postal Service. We can't fund the Postal Service. We can give the banks trillions, but we can't fund the Postal Service. What's helping people out more now? A bank who is hanging up on people, denying them these forgiveness loans, or the Postal Service, who for some people, they rely on their checks that way, that they need to survive. People on Social Security, people on fixed incomes. And our government's telling the Postal Service to pound sand while they're handing the banks trillions to do what they want with it. What a system, man. What a system. That's amazing. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news on with Ron.